stop what you're doing and listen to everything I'm about to say. So I recorded this part after I already finished recording the main video, and something I really wanted to say but forgot to say. If you're trying to learn Japanese, do not do anything else yet. Do not learn how to speak, don't worry about kanji, don't do anything else. Just focus on this video, learn Hiragana and Katakana, learn how to pronounce each of the moras correctly, and once you master Hiragana and Katakana, work on putting words together, work on learning how to speak, and make sure that you master Hiragana and Katakana as soon as possible. Like, I did it within 3 days. Some of you out there may be able to do it within a day because of this video, maybe more, maybe less. Just make sure you master this, and then go from there. But anyways, enjoy the video. Today you're going to learn the entirety of the Japanese Hiragana and Katakana alphabets in as short of a time as possible. And if you're wondering why we are doing both Hiragana and Katakana both at once, it is because while yes, just learning Hiragana, you will be able to spell essentially any word in Japanese that you would ever wish to. With Katakana, that opens up the possibility for you to spell literally anything in Japanese, including things like coffee and ice cream and so on. The way I'm going to be teaching you this is with something called mnemonics, which is essentially a piece of imagery to associate with these letters. Now, I'm not going to be actually displaying any images on the screen because I want you to just look at the image itself and derive the meaning and association from the individual letter, which will help you remember it better in the future. Starting with Hiragana, we are going to be going from left to right, and the letter in Romaji will be right next to each of the symbols, so it will be very easy for you to follow along, and if you ever need to refer back to this video, I'll make sure to timestamp each and every single letter so you can skip straight to the one that you need help remembering. So, Hiragana, going from left to right, starting at the top. A, for this one, just think of it as a messed up A on the bottom there. If you see it sort of like a T, and then on the bottom, it sort of looks like an A that's been mishmashed with that circle shape there. Just think of that as an A. For E, which in Japanese is always represented with an I, but it is actually pronounced as E, again, just look at it. For either the left or the right character, it just looks like an I. So for that one, just remember E, but it kind of looks like an I. For the next one, U, again, it looks like a U on its side, so just remember U looks like a U on its side. For E, it looks like a 7, so every time you see the 7, just think E. Next up we have O, which, again, look at the shape on the bottom, looks like an O. And just like that, you've already learned the first 5 letters or moras of Hiragana. Ka looks like both a K and an A at the same time. If you would take the little piece on the side and flip it over and reattach it to the letter, it looks like a K. But if you would also take that and apply it at the side, at like the top right there, and connect it to the top piece, it would also look like an A. So, to simplify it, every time that you see the little thing falling, just think of Ka. Ki, it looks like a house key, so key. Next we have ku, and for this one, just think of a bird going cuckoo, cuckoo, because that's what the symbol looks like. It looks like a bird's mouth going cuckoo. Next up we have ke, and for this one, I like to think of it as a keg, you know, like a beer keg or a wine keg. Obviously, it's not connected at the bottom, but if you look at the top bar, yeah, you can kind of put 2 and 2 together there. Ko, this one may be hard for some people to imagine, but think of it as 2 koi fish swimming in a pond. And once you see it, and once you Google a picture of 2 koi fish swimming in a pond, you won't be able to unsee it. So that is for ko. And just like that, that is 10 letters down. On to the next row. Sa, I like to think of this as a cool guy with sunglasses saying, "Sa, dude." So every time you see that with a cool little smirk, just think sa. Next up, we have shi, which I like to think of this one as a fishing hook, except instead of shi, it would be she. Next up, we have su, and I like to think of this as, you know, the little T there sort of looks like a stick figure, so think of it as this woman is named Sue, and the little bag on the side is her purse, so it's Sue carrying her purse, Sue. Next we have se, and for this I like to think of this as a seesaw, except in this case it would be a se-saw, and that will actually come in handy later once we get to katakana. So every time that you see se, just keep this in mind for now. It will not be relevant until we get to katakana, but every time that you see the person on the left of the seesaw have a longer leg that swoops below the right side of the seesaw, that means se, and if it's the other way around where the right one has a longer leg, that would be sa, aka the saw, the second half of the seesaw. So, but again, for now, when you see that and it looks like a seesaw, just think se. Next we have so, and I like to think of this one as the, you know, when you're like rubbing yourself down in the shower with soap and water and such, that's sort of the pattern that you would go in, right? Just like left to right, kind of going a bit rugged there, covering your body with all the soap. I like to think of that as so, and that will be very important to some other later letters in the Hiragana alphabet. So now we are on to the 4th row, and for this one we have ta, and I like to think of this one as taco, because you have the T right right there, and then to the right of it, you could kind of say that it looks like a taco if you would put some more lines in there. For that one, that was just always easy for me to remember. Or, if you want to think of it this way, you have the T there, but right next to it, if you remember ka or ko, it looks pretty similar to that, right? So you could just think taco. So that would probably be an even more intuitive way to think of it. So that's ta. Next up we have chi, and this one's pretty easy to remember. Just look at it. It looks like a 5, so anytime you see a 5, just go chi. Next we have tsu, and I like to think of this as a tsunami wave. I know it's a bit extreme, a bit violent, but it's a tsunami wave. Next we have te, and this one sort of looks like a T and an E combined, so that's how I tend to remember it. For you, that may or may not work, but if you look at it at just the right side, it looks like an E, and then if you look at the rest of it, it looks like a T, but not really. So it's, or you could think of it this way, where it's like a T, but it's not. So it's like, it's kind of a T. Te. I know that's a goofy way to think of that one, but it helps me. And then next up we have toe, and this one you are not going to forget. So you see how it kind of looks like a toe, but there's also a thing sticking out of it. Have you guys ever, bashed your toe into a dresser before, or possibly gotten a nail stuck in your toe, or something else violent, extreme, and gory? Yeah, you're not gonna unsee that one now. So that's a toe, and there's something sticking out of that toe. Hopefully they're alright. Moving on to the 5th row, we have na, and I like to think of this one as looking as like a knot, because if you look at the little shape down there, it looks like a knot, so that's how I remember that one. Next up we have ni, and for this one there's 2 ways you could look at it. So you also have the ko kind of returning there to the right of the symbol on the left, so you could I know that may be a little confusing, but typically how I always remember this is that character on the left kind of looks like a knee, like when you bend your knee down. That's how I always remembered it. If you have a vivid imagination, you can probably envision the things that I'm saying. Otherwise, I don't know. I'm doing my best to give you guys a clear image to reference when looking at these letters to help you to remember them. Otherwise, ni does mean 2 in Japanese, so you can remember this by there being 2 lines next to the ni. I don't know, that. But again, when I look at it, I just see a knee, a bent knee. Next up, we have nu, and the way that I remember this is that it sort of looks like a noodle. You know what I mean? Yeah. You have the shapes and it's just going all over the place. You got the chopsticks there in the middle, so it looks like a noodle, and again, that's one that will be relevant later on, so don't forget noodles. Next up, we have ne, and for this one, I don't know why I always saw this, but obviously you have the 2 to the side there, but I've always seen that little sharp indent at the bottom of the first character on the left as sort of looking like a needle of sorts. Again, this is just how my imagination works, and this is the associations that I've made, but it sort of looks like a needle sticking out there. So I always think ni, ne, a needle, a needle. And for this row, we have no, and it's as simple as that. It just looks like a no sign, right? There's a circle with a line through it. It's just saying no. So that's that. On to the next row, starting out with ha. This one does take some imagination, but it sort of looks like an H at the top if you would connect it all the way. So there's your H, and then at the bottom it sort of looks like an A, and that's another example that we'll have coming up here in a few characters. So it sort of looks like a ha if you connect the characters, and then you have like the shape at the bottom. Next up we have he, and this to me always looked like 2 hills, but again, rather than hills, it would be he. Next we have fu, which... Okay, this one's gonna be a little explicit, but if say you're outside walking and you're 3 miles away from home and immediately it starts thunderstorming, rain is pouring down, what would you scream? You would probably say and or scream the F word. F-U, you can spell out the rest. So for this one, obviously instead of fa, it would be fu, but to me that symbol always looked like raindrops coming down, so that's how you can remember that one. You see the raindrops coming down and you go, foo! And then you run home, except obviously it's not foo, it's another word you put in there. Next up we have he, and I always thought of this one as being like a mountain, except somebody's falling down the side of it screaming help as they go, except instead of help, it would just be he, and then I guess they got cut off because they got smacked into a tree or something. So again, every time you see the shape of a hill right there, not like the hills we talked about before with he, but this one where it's just like a triangle, think of somebody falling down the side screaming help. You will never forget this one. Next up we have ho, and easily enough, if you turn your screen 90 degrees to the left, you will see an H and an O right there. It really could not be any simpler. Next up we have the M row, and first things first, ma looks like a ship mast. So except instead of ship mast, just think ship mast, or just ma. You'll get the hang of it very quick. Once you start associating these letters with these mnemonics, it will become very easy for you to remember these alphabets. Next up, we have me, and I always thought of this as being like a hunting bow, hunting for meat. So every time you see the bow, just think meat. Next, we have moo, and this one's really easy. It looks like a cow's nose. So every time you see the cow's nose, just think moo. And if you don't see the cow's nose in that image, Google a picture of a cow's nose and you will see it immediately. So that one, the one that looks like a cow nose, is moo. Next up, we have meh. And this one, this is where some of the rhyming and some of the funky things come into play with the way that I remember Hiragana and Katakana. But if you remember new with the noodles, how I remember meh is noodles without the two is meh. Again, I do have ADHD, so my brain makes really weird associations with random things and remembers things in ways that most humans probably don't. But hey, for some people that may be beneficial or may help in some way. So remember, new without the two is meh. Next we have mo, and this one is really easy because if you remember she, the fishing hook, well mo has mo characters on it. It has some like blades or pointed things on the sides. You're definitely going to be catching mo fish with this one. Get it? Mo? There we go. Next, moving to ya. This one's really easy. It looks like somebody punching their fist in the air going, yeah! Like, I don't know why they're going, yeah. Maybe they're punching someone. Maybe they just won. Maybe it's Mario going, yeah! I don't know. Just, it's somebody going, yeah. Next, we got you, and it looks like somebody going in for a hug and just really squeezing that person in, going, come here, you. Finally, for this row, we have yo, and another easy one. This looks like a snake putting out its hand going, what's up, yo? Just... it's as simple as that. Moving on to the next row, we have Ra, and this one, some people may or may not get the connection here, but once you look up a picture of what I'm about to reference, you'll understand. So I've always thought of this as Rayman's nose, if you've ever played the Rayman video games. If you've never seen Rayman before, just Google a picture of it, and you will immediately see the nose there. Now, I know it may be confusing because it sort of looks like a 5, which I always said, hey, if it looks like a 5, remember chi, but this one, you know, the top is disconnected, and you see the nose before you see the 5, really, at least I do, so... again, look up a picture of Rayman, and you'll never forget Ra. Next, we have Ri, and there is 2 ways that this character can look. So, if it's the 2-stroke version, it's very easy to remember it as being a river, but here in this graph, which is actually the more common version, unfortunately, it looks like an N. So, it's still, you could say, kind of looks like a river in a way, because of the way it turns, but I don't know. That one may be a little tricky. Just remember that Ri looks like an N, which... that is another character in the Hiragana alphabet, so that may be a little tricky there, but the one that looks more like an N is actually Ri, and the one that looks more like an H is actually N, so, again, a little tricky, but we're doing our best here with the mnemonics, right? Next, we have Ru, and this is going to be very relevant for not just this letter, but one coming up in 2 letters. So, you guys remember So, how it looks like you're, like, scrubbing yourself down? Well, if So has a 2, then it's Ru, okay? So, I'm going to teach you guys a little rhyme in a few characters, but just remember that for now. Next up, we have Re, and this one's sort of similar to Ne. Like, it looks pretty similar, except Ne, if you remember, had like a 2 connected to it, whereas Re just sort of has like a hump on the side going up. So this one, I've always thought of it as somebody like punching their fist up going, I'm ready, like SpongeBob just having the fist up on the side. And there's another character coming up that looks kind of similar to that, but it looks different enough to where you'll be able to see the mnemonic differentiations there. And then finally for this row, we have Ro. that was throwing me off a minute there. And this one sort of looks like a 3, so how I remember this is, because it still looks similar to So, I've always thought of it as this. If So has a 2, then it's Ru. If So has a 3, then it's Ro. Again, it kind of rhymes, so if you just remember that rhyme, if So has a 2, then it's Ru, or if So has a 3, then it's Ro. Okay? Try to remember that, because, you know, they all look different enough to where it shouldn't trip you up after you've had a bit of time to study these characters. Now we're getting to the end here, but for Wa, again, it looks very similar to Re, but when I look at this one, I think of Wario from the Mario series. Again, if you've never seen Wario, just look up a Google picture of it. I've always thought of that as being Wario's big fat belly. Next, we have O, which is actually supposed to be Wo, or Wo. I don't know why it's just spelled as O here, probably because most times when it's used, it is used as a particle, which is O, but this one, in editing, I'm actually going to go ahead and correct that and make it Wo, the way that it's supposed to be. But for this one, I've always thought of it as somebody jumping over another person, and the person on the bottom going, whoa, like covering their head. And then finally, we have N, which is, it looks like an N, but again, it kind of also sort of looks like an H, so I don't know. Between Ri and N or N, you know, it's one of those things where over time you'll learn the differences. But the one that looks more like an H but still looks like an N, or has the longer line on the side, that's the one that's and then for ri, again, if it's the two-stroke version, it's very easy to see that it looks like a river, but in this case where it's the one-stroke version, yeah, that may be a little tricky, so that's just one of those things where you'll have to remember it, but after you have some time with these characters, you'll be able to see they actually do look quite different, and there is enough differences between them to where your brain will pick them up. So next we're going to move on to Katakana, and this one is both easier and harder in different ways. So we're just going to go ahead and get started here. For the first one, I've always thought of this one as looking like an axe. For E, I think of it as looking as, or I, it is spelled as I, but again, remember, it sounded out as E. You know, I've always thought of this one as being like internet poles, you know, outside, how you have like the telephone wires. That's just what it looks like to me. Next up, we have U, or a U, and for this, I've always thought of a unicorn, because you see the little, it sort of looks like a head with a unicorn horn there, and that will be relevant later on, so don't forget the unicorn. The unicorn is very important. Next up, we have E, and I've always thought of this as looking like elevator doors. Next, we have O, and I've always thought of this as it sort of looks like a person is standing on the right, and then there's like a foot of some kind maybe coming to kick them in the chest, and when they get kicked in the chest, they go, oh! So, that's how I've always remembered that. Again, my imagination is a little violent, but what can you do? I grew up on like Street Fighter, Streets of Rage, Mortal Kombat, Resident Evil, throw in some Call of Duty and a bunch of superhero games and movies and stuff like that and comic books, and yeah, my imagination gets a little violent, but hey, it's helped me learn Japanese so far, so I'd say it was all worth it. Next up we have Ka, and this one looks so similar to its Hiragana counterpart that, you know, once you get used to the Hiragana counterpart, you'll just get used to the Katakana one. So this one, I don't really have an association because it looks the exact same. Ka is just Ka. Next up we have Ki, and another gruesome one here, but it sort of looks like some scars, you know what I mean? Sort of like, you know when you get like stitched up? Well, yeah, these sort of look like some scars or some stitches when somebody tries to kill you, when you get killed, or Ki, you know, the first two letters, Ki there, so. A little gruesome, I know, or if you want something a bit lighter, you could say that it looks like a kite flying through the sky. Maybe if your imagination is a bit more vibrant, because I also saw that too, but for me, I always just thought about scars when you're getting killed, or Ki. Next we got Q, and for this one, it sort of looks like a Minecraft hand going up at an angle, saying like, thumbs up, Q. Except, you know, obviously Minecraft hands don't have thumbs, so for this one, it would just be, that's cool, or Q. Next we have Ke, and this one is so easy. If you turn it ever so slightly, like turn your screen 30 degrees to the left, it looks like both a K and a E kind of at the same time. So the one that sort of looks like a K, but also kind of like an E, but also not really like a K. Similar to the T example from before, where it's like, it's a T, but it's not. Meh, te. Same thing here. Ke. Next up, we have call, and this one looks like a coffee handle. Call. Moving on to the next row, Sa. This is what I was talking about during the Hiragana section, where if the one on the right is longer, that's the second half of the C, Saw. So in this one, it's Sa. Next we have She, and this does look very similar to a character coming up. So don't linger on this one for too long. For now, just remember the word sheep, and it will make sense once we get to Tsu. Next we have Su, and for this one I've always thought of it as looking at like somebody running at super speed, you know, with the Naruto arms going in the back, or, you know, since we're trying to teach Japanese here, I guess I should stop saying it the American way and say Naruto. I've been learning Japanese for a bit, but I'm not exactly fluent yet. I'm just a learner trying to help other people learn. So I still say things like anime and Naruto with my English accent, but I should really say anime and Naruto. But anyway, yeah, it looks like somebody running with the Naruto arms in the back and running at super speed. That's how I've always remembered it. Next up we have Se, and like before, like the one from Hiragana, if the one on the left is longer, that's the first half of the seesaw. So there you go, that's Se. Next we have So, and like She, this is one that'll be relevant later. So for now, just think of this as somebody going to sit down on a sofa, and again, there's going to be some differentiations going on there. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind for now. Next up we have Ta, and this one is really easy. If you turn your phone or your screen slightly to the right, you will see a T in the middle there, but then also if you go ahead and turn it to the left a little bit, you'll see an A right there. So the one that looks like a T and an A combined is Ta. Next up we have Chi, and this one looks like somebody standing over a desk, leaning to the right a little bit to cheat on a test. Chi. Next we have Tsu, and this goes back to She. So the one that's more horizontal, that is a sheep, and the one that's more vertical, like there's a very, very clear distinction between horizontal and vertical. The Tsu is the tsunami wave coming to knock down the sheep, aka She. Tsu and She. So, and another way you can think of it is put your arm out horizontally and think sheep, and then put your arm up vertically and think tsunami. tsunami wave coming for the sheep. She and then Su. For te, I've always thought of this as being a tennis table, and there's like a ball going over it, but it's going so fast that it looks like a blur, so that's why it's so wide, because like the tennis ball is like mid-flight right there, so there's the tennis table, or te. And then finally for this row we have toe, and for this I've always thought of it as somebody like pointing down to the other person's toe, just pointing down like, that's your toe, toe. So there we go. Now we're moving on to the 5th row, and now we have na, and this is a funny one for it to try to remember, but just look at it and think, is that a T? Nah. I'm serious, that's how I remember it. Next up we have ni, and this goes back to what I was saying during the hiragana section, where ni means 2 in Japanese, so every time you see 2 lines, just think ni. You're gonna need to learn numbers at some point anyway, so you'll get used to that one very easily. Next up we have nu, and this is another one that is gonna be relevant later on. I know there's a lot of that for the katakana section, but that's just how katakana is. So think of me and you look the same, or me and nu. It's not going to make sense yet, but it will in a little bit, so I'll explain more of that analogy later on. Next up we have ne, and another really easy one. If you turn this one slightly to the left, you're able to see both an N and an E if your imagination is creative enough. So if you see an N and an E, that means it is ne. And then finally for this row we have no, and this one's real easy. It looks like somebody putting their arm or their hand up to say no. Just like real quick, putting their arm up, no. So, there we have it. That's the N section or row cleared. Moving on to the H row, we have ha, and I've always thought of this as being like 2 tears coming out of a cartoon character's faces when they're laughing. You know, like the emoji, for example, the laughing, crying one. I've always thought of this as the tears from that one, so it's going like ha ha ha. I don't know why. I can see a face behind those characters even though there's not a face there. Again, ADHD plus a very vivid imagination. It just leads to me seeing things that clearly aren't there, but that's what's helped me remember it. Next up we have he, aka hi, because that's what it looks like. It looks like somebody putting their arm up to say hi, similar to yo. Make sure you don't get those two mixed up, but this one, again, it's clear enough of a distinction to where it's very clear that this is a katakana character. Listen to me, I'm starting to say my English words with a Japanese accent, but looks like somebody putting their hand up to say hi, so he. Next up we have fu, and I've always thought of this one, if you turn your screen sideways, it sort of looks like a shark fin. If you were in the middle of an ocean and you saw a shark fin, what would you do? Yeah, you'd probably scream the F-bomb. So every time you see that one, just think fa, except in this case it's fu. Next we have he, and this one looks exactly like the hiragana he. So again, just think of somebody rolling down the side of that hill, screaming help. Then finally we have ho, and to me this always looked like Santa carrying 2 bags on either side going ho ho ho. So that always, I've remembered that one ever since the first time that I've seen it. Moving on to the next row, and this one, oh man, this is going to be a very sensitive one, but if you look at ma, if you look at it in a certain way, it kind of looks like a breast from the side view, and obviously when babies are young, they breastfeed, so think of the breast and then think of mama, mama, I'm hungry, mama. It's a booby. Next we have me, and this is a very easy one to remember. Just think, do, re, mi. You know, you ever been in music class? Do, re, mi. Yeah, so that's how I remember that one. 3 lines, do, re, and mi. Next we have mu, and I've always thought of this as somebody flexing their muscles. Like, yeah, look at my muscles, mu. Next we have me, and this goes back to what I was talking about with new a few rows before, where me and you look the same, or rather, me and you. Always remember it that way, me and you, because that's how it's supposed to be sounded out. Well, really it's more me and new, but we're just trying to create the mnemonic associations here. So me and new look the same, except you have a weird hat on. So that's how I've remembered it. Me and you look the same, except you have a weird hat on. So just me and new, except new has the hat. And then finally we have mo. And once again, this looks exactly like the hiragana mo. So just think you're gonna be catching mo with this one, with this fishing hook. So yeah, again, mo looks basically the same, no issues there. Next we have ya. Once again, looks very identical to the hiragana version of ya. Just think of somebody punching their arm in the air going, ya, wahoo, ya. Next we have U, and this one, very easy. If you turn your screen to the right, it looks like a Y and a U combined. Well, it's sort of like a backwards U and a backwards Y all at the same time, but if it looks like both, that means that it's U. Next we have Yo, and for this one, if you guys know the rapper Eminem, it looks like his backwards E, so I've always just thought of like the beginning of the song The Way I Am, where he's like, Ayo. Very easy to remember that one. If you see a backwards E, just think of Eminem going, yo. Down to the next row, we have Ra, and I've always thought of this one as being a monster's face. You see the little eye there with the mouth below it going, Ra! Or in this case, just Ra. Next up, we have ri, and if you turn this, turn your screen upside down, it looks like an R and an I, or an R and an I, so it's very easy to remember that one, just ri, and if you're having trouble remembering it, again, just flip your screen upside down. It looks like an R and an I, very easy. Same thing here, R and U, aka ru, and if you turn your screen upside down, it looks like a backwards R, and it sort of looks like a U on its side right there, so once again, it's very easy to remember that one. Next up, we have re, and this one I've always thought as being a razor blade, or a razor blade, if you want to really stretch things there, but like a razor blade pointing downwards, or razor blade, remember it more that way. Razor blade. I don't want to confuse anybody here, so it's a razor blade. Next we have ro, and I've always thought of this one as being a robot's head, so you really can't unsee that once you see it once. On to the next row, we have wa, and remember how I said earlier you want to remember u or u and the unicorn horn? Well, a unicorn without its horn is what? Yeah, I know that one's a little corny, but a unicorn without its horn is what? I mean, seriously, what would you call a unicorn without its horn? Like a pony? Like, no, that's not the same. So a unicorn without its horn is what? Hopefully that helps you remember that one. And then next we have whoa, and I've always thought of this one as being like a F, and you know, if you're in a casual conversation and all of a sudden somebody would drop the F-bomb, you'd probably be like, whoa, what was that about? So every time you see an F, think of the F word, you can spell out the rest, and then just think of you being like, whoa, why'd you say that? And then finally we have and this goes back to what I was saying before about so, where if you look at so, it looks like a guy going to sit down on the edge of a sofa, whereas for it looks like somebody that is diving into the middle of their bed for a nap. So again, it might take you a couple of times seeing it to figure out the difference, but for me, it took me like 3 or 4 times, and immediately I was able to pick them apart easily. Again, for so, it's a guy going to sit down on the edge of his sofa, and if he's diving for the middle of it, he is tired, he is diving in for a nap. And with that, you have officially learned the entirety of Hiragana and Katakana. And again, I'm going to go through and meticulously label each and every single character we have talked about today, and hopefully that will help you remember it. And if you're sitting there wondering, wait, what about the diacritics? Well, like the different lines and symbols and stuff like that? Don't worry, I got you covered. We're gonna go over that really quickly. So, an easy way to remember this. Think of any letter. So for example, the ka, ki, ku, ke, ko, ro. If you see those with 2 lines, which is the only way that they can be different, the only ones that can be affected by a degree symbol or anything like that, is the H row, the ha, he, fu, he, ho. So let's go over the other ones first. For ka, ki, ku, ke, ko, or the S's, or the T's, or the H's, the letters that are, you know, affected by those 2 lines, they will instead sound like the closest sounding letter in the alphabet. So the ka's will become ga's. Instead of K-A, it will be G-A. Very similar. Ka, and then ga. For sa or C or, you know, any of those, instead of S, it'll go to a Z. So instead of sa, it would be za. Instead of ta, it would be da. And then for ha, this one is a bit of a stretch, but that would become ba. So with a B, and then if you see a degree symbol instead, it'll be a P. So again, it will take you a little bit of time to learn the differences there, but the only ones that can be affected by a degree symbol are the H or the F one. That's another one to point out there. So for foo, if that one has 2 lines, it will similarly to the H ones become a B, so that would actually be boo. But if you see it with a degree symbol, it would then be poo. There is also a few other outliers where she would become G, so J-I, G, and then chi would become G with spelled like D-J-I, but it could also be read as G, and then tsu, T-S-U, could be read as D-Z-U, so zu, and those little markings apply to both hiragana and katakana. So again, it may take you a bit of time to remember the H ones specifically because the differences between B and P, but if you just remember that, just remember ha becomes ba, and then if it has a degree symbol, it becomes pa, and then the rest of the letters literally sounding the exact same, just slightly different, like ka becoming ga, again, it's like the closest thing in the alphabet, or ta becoming da. You'll master it in no time. Again, this was just more or less trying to set up those mnemonic associations so you could more easily remember hiragana and katakana. Japanese, not even just Japanese, really learning any language, doesn't matter if you're even trying to learn caveman speak, no language is easy to learn, and you know, I never really make videos like this, but I'm currently learning Japanese, and I know it can be pretty daunting at first trying to figure things out, especially when you're first trying to learn the alphabet. And for me, mnemonic associations for both the alphabets as well as the words, just in general in the language, has helped a ton when it has come to learning Japanese so far. So hopefully this helps somebody out there that is trying to learn Japanese at the moment, or is starting out, or doesn't know where to start. Learning Hiragana and Katakana is the most important thing you should do when learning Japanese. This is the very first step you should take before you speak, before you write, before you learn literally anything else. Hiragana and Katakana, before even kanji, nothing like that, just Hiragana, Katakana. Those are the two things you should learn first, so now you know them, and again, you can reference this video at any time. But again, hopefully this helps somebody, and yeah, that's it. Love you guys. Feel free to refer back to this video at any time, and I'll leave it there. Have an amazing day. Good luck on your Japanese learning journey. ご覧いただきありがとうございます。じゃあまた。